worst of times. It was the age of wisdom. It was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief. It was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light. It was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope. It was the winter of despair. So begins Charles Dickens' classic novel, A Tale of Two Cities. While written about France and the French Revolution, these sentiments might be considered somewhat applicable to the United States of America at present. When asked by Dean Yang to speak to you tonight, old and ugly though I am, I initially considered presenting a brief narrative on the significance of the successful completion of your studies at SPAA, which is indeed an accomplishment well worth noting. And believe me, I do. But I concluded that doing only that would suggest you are impervious to what the present moment requires of you as newly minted public affairs practitioners. So yes, I heartily celebrate your academic achievements and acknowledge the hard work you have put into preparing for the next phase of your lives. But the situation I just referenced will test you in ways you may not have anticipated, because Dickens' words rightly, I think, characterize the present moment and suggest what your unfolding public administration careers will require you to manage. Therefore, out of respect for your awareness of how fortunate we are as a nation, and equally for your likely alarm about looming threats, I thought I should briefly delve into a couple of best features of who we are and where we are, and give equal attention to the most menacing threats to these features as I see them. So for the next several minutes, let me explore three critical issues that speak to the best and worst, to belief and incredulity, and to hope and despair associated with the times in which we live and to which we must respond. First, in my estimation, the precarious condition of American democracy is probably the most pressing issue of our time. While the U.S. has always been an imperfect work and very much one still in progress, American democracy is regarded as a fundamental framework second to none, articulated in the Declaration of Independence and codified in the United States Constitution. This framework makes individual freedom, liberty, equality, and the pursuit of happiness possible. It is the framework that over the years has attracted millions to this nation's shores, and for millions of others around the world, it is long to be experienced. Its undeniable imperfections notwithstanding, our constitutional framework radiates a light of hope and conviction that has inspired freedom-loving people around the world for a quarter millennium. That framework for most of us is a precious jewel, treasured as the nation's most important attribute. Without a doubt, it speaks to what we regard as the basis upon which our strength as a nation, this American experiment, is built. It describes what we believe is best about our state of affairs. Now, however, we confront a movement that attempts to ignore, reject, and overturn the fundamental tenets of the Constitution and instead to recast our governmental structure as an autocracy. The jewel is being chipped away today, and the crisis is real. We now confront, for example, the effort to govern by executive order, to wage war without congressional approval or public debate, and to declare unconstitutional policies, laws, and long-accepted principles that acknowledge America as a multiracial and multi-ethnic society. Moreover, in a mockery of the words emblazoned on the Statue of Liberty, which say, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free." Today, immigrants are forcefully removed from our communities without due process. Clearly, this can't be the American democracy in action. We in this country pride ourselves on personal freedom, and our citizens enjoy it without reservation. How does the democracy framework discussed above survive under this unfolding assault? In this instance, it could be said, this is our worst of times. How will you respond? To what extent has your training at SPAA prepared you to meet the challenge this moment requires? Second, there is the issue of freedom of speech, a central and often symbolic place in American society. It is both a prized constitutional protection and a broader cultural ideal tied to democracy, individual liberty, dissent, and suspicion of government power. The First Amendment to the United States Constitution still provides broad legal protections for speech, but it is challenged by powerful new technology platforms that control our public discourse. Moreover, colleges and universities have become major battlegrounds over speech and academic freedom. Book bans and school curriculum battles over race-related curriculum, gender and sexuality topics, and historical interpretation are now common. Free speech concerns are debated around protest rights and public demonstrations, as well as workplace and professional speech. Perhaps one of the most challenging debates centers on hate speech and extremism. Then there is the emerging concern about the impact of artificial intelligence, rage algorithms, and deepfakes. Today, free speech conflicts reflect a deep disagreement about what freedom of speech is for. Is it about maximal protection from censorship, open debate, and trust of authority? Or is it protection from harassment and intimidation, social equality, and limiting harmful information? The current era, some would argue, is shaped by the collision of these two visions in a polarized, highly interconnected society. Whether you work in government, the nonprofit sector, the private sector, or in education, you will find yourselves trying to navigate the free speech challenges I've just enumerated. There is no escaping it, so be forewarned. Finally, we face the horror of rising political violence. It is true that U.S. history has never been free of political violence, but we have largely managed to control episodes of such violence through reasoned governmental response to the underlying causes. During the 20th century, political violence in America was mostly limited to two periods of rapid social and economic change. 1919 and the 1920s, the early 1920s, following World War I, and the 1960s during the civil rights struggles and the Vietnam War. Both periods were fueled by intense change in society and by fear and conflict over who would hold power in America. The 1920s, a period of rising prosperity, was also marked by significant political violence and repression. The Red Scare, a response to the Russian Revolution and the fear of the spread of communism. Anti-radical violence, a response to labor strikes and bombings, along with the resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan, reflected conflict between industrial capitalism, organized labor, socialism, state authority, and anti-racial and ethnic animus in the United States. 1960s saw violence from both white supremacists defending the old order and radicals seeking revolutionary change. The civil rights movement and urban riots and rebellions were prominent features of this era, as were political assassinations, among them of President John F. Kennedy, Malcolm X, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert F. Kennedy. But for the past 50 years, there has been little significant political violence, though undeniably there has been a long, unhappy litany of racially motivated hate killings and abuses, often under the guise of legitimate police authority. That changed on January 6, 2021, when political violence was on vivid display in the nation's capital. We all acknowledge that our nation currently is politically tense and that political violence has reemerged, although thankfully it is generally lower than during the 1960s. Recently, there have been assassination attempts, attacks on elected officials, ideologically motivated shootings, threats against election workers, and violent extremist attacks. The incidents have come from across the political spectrum and often reflects intense polarization. The United States sitting president, Donald Trump, has experienced 3 assassination attempts since 2024. Former Congresswoman Nancy Pelosi and her husband were the victims of an attack at their home in San Francisco. And House Majority Whip Steve Scalise was wounded at a congressional baseball practice in Alexandria, Virginia. And there have been bomb threats and intimidation directed at polling places and election officials during and after the 2020 and 2024 elections. There have also been threats against local officials, judges, public servants, as well as violent anti-Semitic attacks and other ideologically motivated hate crimes. Our responses to the 3 descriptions of light and darkness just presented will likely define the American future we should anticipate. Democracy or autocracy. Freedom of speech shaped by the tension between protection from censorship and protection from harassment and intimidation, or whether to accept political violence as a social norm or the choices before us. Well, I have confined my comments thus far to our domestic situation. Yet on the international front, another set of challenges is demanding attention because they raise questions about America's role in the world. Among the challenges are such matters as our nation's position on and value of our participation in NATO, the North American Treaty Organization, America's projection of unilateral decision-making and action in matters of war and peace, and America's pursuit of economic policies that serve our interests at the expense of longtime allies in Europe and Asia. Our role and responsibility for addressing the global climate emergency has also been abandoned. In fact, America has adopted an aggressive go-it-alone posture on the world stage, one defined by the phrase, America first. We are currently at a point where middle power nations feel that if they are not at the table, they are probably on the menu. At the conclusion of A Tale of Two Cities, the hero Sidney Carton sacrifices himself to save his beloved and their family from the guillotine, the looming symbol of the reign of terror that corrupted the ideals of the French Revolution. On the scaffold, he declares, "It is a far, far better thing I do than I have ever done before." I do not wish upon any of you such a dire choice as you confront the vexing challenges before us. However, I leave you with this admonition. Apply the skills you have acquired through matriculation at SPAA to help us navigate the difficult and complex challenges our nation faces. You can make a difference if you elect to get in the fray or to offer support to those who demonstrate a deep concern about our nation's future and are willing to act. Hopefully what you choose to do will help to make America a better place than it has ever been before. So, congratulations, graduate. Go forward, prosper, and make a difference.